Culture warriors are ashamed.
Culture Warriors. Yeah. Unchained. Let's go. Lines in the sand, welcome to the front row. Real life hitting, everybody wanna know. When the spin get thick, who cuts through the chain? AK, David Drew stepping into the frame. Late nights, boots in the dirt. From the grind to the house, to the scarf, to the grease stain shirts. Parents, pegrees, fight for what's true. From the clinic to the warehouse, to your living room. Headlines screaming, but we ain't scared. Faith in our bones, yeah, we can't prepare. Culture Warriors Unchained. Where the real ones meet the rage. Where the truth cuts through the noise. Every voice on the stage. Culture Warriors Unchained. From the heartland to your brain. If you're tired of the script, we're here to break the chain.
What is going on, everybody? Drew Outstanding here, Culture Warriors Unchained. We have an amazing show for you tonight. It is actually episode 35. And so July 20th, I can't believe the 4th was just around the corner a little bit ago. And now we're getting closer to August and the rest of summer. I can't really tell because every day is heat right now in Minnesota. I know the rest of the country is feeling it as well. But yeah, it's exciting. So we're here on Monday evening doing a catch up from the weekend and really looking at what the stories are going to be for the rest of the week. So the big one, we got Iran war tensions. Who knows if Iran war is done, if it's going to keep going. Unfortunately, we had some service members pass away. This hits home to myself and David, absolutely, and then as well as other Americans completely. One was a 19-year-old, saw her picture, so we'll discuss that. It's a complicated situation, and we'll try to make it so we can all understand it a little bit more. DHS announces election security measures after President Trump's national address, so that came right after as well. It was interesting. So yeah, the big soccer game, Trump was there, and then bombs started happening right afterwards. So they say everyone has 24 hours in the day, and we're all busy and stuff like that. But I don't know how this guy gets everything done. Depends on the people around you, I suppose. The Tate brothers are in a little bit more trouble. Detained in the U.S. on behalf of the U.K. So I followed this story a little bit as well. And so we're an extradition country, ties to UK. I guess it was handled pretty smoothly. It wasn't a big story how it went down. But it was just like, hey, we got this thing we need to do, and we're going to follow through on it. So, and then the battle for data centers. So that's going to be a hot topic, especially related to utilities and the average person. Are we spending more, less, and kind of what's going to happen to that? And then hour 2, we're going to get into our awesome guest, Mary Talley Bowden. Hopefully I said that correctly. I hear your name all the time. And it's an honor to have you here. Mary, quickly, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And I admire your fight, and that you are, I want to talk about your story too. But yeah, I'm an ear, nose, and throat sleep medicine specialist in Houston, Texas. And it'd take me a while to explain everything, but basically I stumbled into the pandemic, and because I'm an independent doctor, I was able to treat patients the way I thought they should be treated. And they tried to take me down for doing that, and I've just been fighting back ever since.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've been following your story for what seems like a few years now. We just kind of got in the same circles and been communicating. And yeah, I'd love to get to know you a little bit more in hour 2, and we'll dive into that. Got my co-host here, AK. Who are you? What do you do? What do you know today?
My name is A.K. Kamara. I'm actually the Republican National Committeeman for the state of Minnesota. Drew said already earlier, we are live with episode 35. And so if you guys have liked what you've seen in our previous episodes, you like us right now, maybe you're brand new, make sure that you guys hit the like button, hit the share button, subscribe button. Really, this entire podcast is meant to try and understand that we have to affect culture, that politics is downstream of culture. And so my role on this podcast, I'm the dude that's just a normal guy that also happens to be one of the 168 members of the Republican National Committee. So some people might have this idea or perception that if you're involved in party politics, you have to be like stuck up or not working class. That is not the case with me, as I'm rocking my Naruto Shippuden shirt. I'm a normal dude, but I love this country. And my hope is that if you think that this country is not going in the right direction in any way, shape, or form, get active and involved. And especially if you think that the Republican Party should be more responsive, that's what I want to encourage people to do. But that's my role here on this podcast. How about you, David? Who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, good evening. David Webster here, aka the Peruvian Gentleman. I am the legal immigrant on this panel. I'm the guy who came here from somewhere else and decided that it's much better to live here. So much so that I enlisted in the military, and I, all around nerd, lover of books and the way stories are told, and that's kind of what I bring to the table with this. Learning about politics from my good friend AK. But yeah, I'm excited to dig into some of these topics.
Yeah. Well, before that, find us on wherever you listen, watch. YouTube is the one we're big onto, but we're also on Rumble. What else? Facebook. I'm streaming to my X, where I got a little bit of followers, and Mary has some, and AK has some, and David's on his way too. But yeah, so on X, Apple, Pandora, Google, Spotify, all the things. So we meet you where you are. But yeah, let's jump into that. And AK, correct me if I'm wrong, Subscribestar is the best place to support us. Keep the lights on, like my little light over here. Brothers. Keeps that light on for sure. But yeah, and I'm going to make a showrunner decision. Say, if you subscribe to us on Subscribestar, you can be part of our wheel of news at the end. So I want to hear from the audience and people that are willing to help us make the show awesome. That being said, let's get into the first article.
So we're going to start off with some sadder news, but it's important that you understand that this country, regardless of what you think about our involvement in foreign entanglements, foreign war, this country owes a debt of gratitude to members that raise their hand, that volunteer to serve this country. And today we unfortunately have some very sad news that there's a couple of more identified at this point service members that have died in battle. There was a third service member, but we'll kind of read through this story. We have Private Isabella Gonzalez, who is the young woman on the left, who was a member of the U.S. Army, and also First Lieutenant Tyler James Feehan. And again, young guy, only 25 years old, and they were killed in action on July 17th and July 18th, respectively. And again, just kind of looking at the story, I'm going to have David kind of read us and run us through this story so far.
The Pentagon released the identities Monday of two soldiers killed in action late last week in an Iranian ballistic missile and drone attack in Jordan. U.S. Army Private Isabella Gonzalez, 19, of Carlton, Texas, and First Lieutenant Tyler James Feehan, 25, from Iwa Beach, Hawaii, died July 17th and July 18th, respectively, according to the Department of Defense. The active duty soldiers were killed during an attack at the Mawafaq Salty Air Base in Jordan. I don't live there, so it doesn't matter.
How dare you say those blasphemy words? This is a family-friendly show. You said
immigration without assimilation is invasion. Let me get back to the article. Gonzalez was stationed at Ansbach, Germany, assigned to the 1st Battalion, 57th Air Defense Artillery Regiment, and the 52nd Air Defense Artillery Brigade, 10th Army Air Missile Defense Command. Feehan was stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, assigned to the 2nd Battalion, 55th Air Defense Artillery Regiment, 3rd Army Air Missile Defense Command. The incident is currently under investigation, the release states. And then The U.S. Central Command announced another U.S. service member is missing following the attack, while 4 troops who have since been discharged were medically evacuated to hospitals in Jordan. For the 9th consecutive night, the U.S. hit Iran very hard again tonight, President Donald Trump said on Sunday. The strikes, he said, were in honor of the soldiers who were killed. The strikes will continue degrading Iranian military capabilities used to attack commercial vessels and civilian mariners transiting the Strait of Hormuz. A SETCOM post from Sunday reads.
And I'm just gonna to give this larger kind of understanding of the cost of our service members is that so far since the Iran war has began, we've lost 17 U.S. service members, reflecting a conflict fought largely through the air. U.S. military reports that another service member has been killed in conflict in Iran, bringing the total to 17. So I'm just kind of curious around the horn. Obviously, things that happen in the world of the U.S. Armed Forces are happening at breakneck speed. I don't have access to privileged information, intel data. At some point, we had this memorandum of understanding, this MOU that was signed. Seemed like things were somewhat okay, and now things have gone hot. Today, technically, is the 10th day. Right now, I believe we are attacking targets in Iran. And I'm just kind of curious from everyone's perspective, overall, largely, what are your thoughts so far on this ongoing conflict? Myself, I've made my position very clear. I do support the president in this operation. I'm less, I guess for sure certain as time goes on if it's going to turn out to be the correct strategy here. But my main, thought process here is that we have to honor those that lost their lives and not forget who they are and what they sacrificed for their entire lives in this case, and also prayers to their friends and their family. But yeah, around the horn, feel free to add whatever kind of your thoughts
the big thing is, like where does it end? What are we doing? And I'm not, people are asking questions of, the administration, the presidents. It's like, they're not going to lay out the complete plan, but let's understand kind of the goal here. So far, I've heard just Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, but then what it's going to take to maintain that stance. But as far as Jordan goes, it hits close to home to me because on my last deployment with the 34th Infantry Division, Minnesota National Guard, we were in Arif Jan, Kuwait, and a lot of us, myself included, went to Jordan, UAE, Bahrain, a lot of these countries that we have close ties with. And so it seems like, and I've been hearing other people say this, is like instead of Iran targeting the U.S. or U.S. bases, they're like, okay, we'll go after your allies where there are U.S. soldiers at places like this, like Jordan and other places. And that's going to be a tough one to fight because there are service members all over the world in different places, and the defenses are going to be completely different with each one. So I'm hoping for a little more clear stuff. The U.S. soldiers getting taken out is a big one for us. More on the softer side, but still has an impact, is fuel prices. So it's like we're feeling that as well. The average person is feeling that, and now you add on service members getting taken out. It's not a good plan.
Yeah. What about you, David?
I think from the everyman perspective, because I as I said before, I'm not like as knee deep in politics as you are, AK. And just kind of looking at it from the prior service military everyman kind of more perspective, this has to, in the end, whatever we're trying to do in Iran has to be worth it for the lives that we've lost and for the lives that our allies are losing, because that's the thing that they didn't necessarily cover in this article, which makes sense because it's about these service people. But like they're targeting all of our allies in the Middle East, right, that have been helping us to bombard Iran. And they're ultimately taking the brunt of what the retaliation would be against us. And in that process, some of our soldiers that are stationed in those areas are getting injured or losing their lives. And as somebody who deployed, like Drew, I want whatever the outcome of this conflict, it has to be worth the price we're paying. There has to be something that either benefits part of the whole Make America Great strategy, right? Otherwise, this is going to potentially go down as Trump's Vietnam, and I don't want that. But I'm not going to be like ignorant to what we're looking at, which is if we don't have some sort of final outcome that fully benefits the U.S., that fully makes those sacrifices, honors those sacrifices, this is going to be not something he's remembered fondly for.
Oh, 100%. You have any thoughts on this at all, Dr. Bowden?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the least informed person on the panel here, and I am curious. So I'm just, from the non-military, sort of political, but not really political viewpoint, is why in the world are we doing this? And everybody thinks Israel is pressuring us to do it. And I'm curious for the two, AK, you're not in the military from what I understand, right? But
Correct.
David
Yep.
and Drew, yeah. So
Yeah.
is there certainly more to this than they're letting the public know, and that we should just trust the plan? Or can we take it at face value? How much of this can we take at face value? And what do you think about Israel pressuring us to get involved in this? To me, it feels like we've just kicked the hornet's nest, and now we're screwed.
Especially in a time where so many, like, a lot of the current administration. So it's like the people that like this administration won, but now there's so much division in between the people that were supporting President Trump and everybody getting now into power. And then you add on, like you said, the Israel thing. It's like with Israel, I don't know what to believe. People are for, against, and up and down. I've just backed off on the whole Israel thing until I can know more about that or can say things with some kind of intelligence. But yeah, I don't know.
So here's something I think is important to always remember, right? Let's go back to what President Trump's stance relatively through his first term and now second term has been, is that he doesn't want forever wars. And so there is this element, and you touched on it, Dr. Bowden, of just trust the plan. And, I think that there is an aspect where, again, because I don't have access to intel, when the White House earlier today, released this post, and it's a poll saying overwhelming support for Iran peace deal. And this is done by Big Data Poll, which shout out to Rich Barris. He's one of the guys, one of the pollsters there with Big Data Poll, just showing that, yes, indeed, there is overwhelming support for a peace deal. So when I see this, it does kind of make me pause and say, well, maybe there was another specific action that we can't get into, and that this is a larger overall military objective, and not to go all trust the plan, but that ultimately that it seems like it's not as cut and dry or straightforward, that the White House is releasing this, which clearly the president's team is going to allow that to happen, or they wouldn't if they didn't have any desire. So is there kind of like a larger perspective? But ultimately, at the end of the day, when I think back during Trump's first term and now second term, I continue to see those within his realm, in Trump world, we'll call it, et al., that there is not an appetite for a longer invasion. But I do believe that military objectives, for whatever reason that weren't being met, have to now be met. And I personally, I pray for peace, because politically, this is not how we win the midterms. People don't want to be at war from now until the midterms. And if it happens to be that way, we're going to have to hear very, very thoroughly explanation of what are we doing and why are we doing it. Otherwise, my fear, beyond just all of the other things, is that it's, regardless of what else you think is good about this administration, how do we go to the American people and say, hey, we weren't at a war with Iran, but now we are, so vote for us to keep us back in power?
And I can tell midterm elections have started because I'm getting text messages like crazy for all the above, all across
every candidate on both sides. I'm getting both sides now. I don't know how the heck that happened. I don't like it.
Get out of my phone. I think, that's the thing. It's like we're going into that midterm season now, and war is going to be on talking about it. And it's like, what are you going to be able to say? It's like, what are we doing here? It's like, okay, yeah, Iran not getting a nuclear weapon, but what's going to be the cost of that? And yeah, when they started saying timelines earlier, like 5 weeks and things, what was that, like 3 months ago? I'm just like, please don't put timelines out there,
Well,
So
if you guys remember correctly, and not to be an anti-Trumper, because I'm not. That's not what I'm saying right now. But Trump was also the one that, he was in office when they did the 2 weeks to slow the spread. I don't know if you guys remember that. I mean, that wasn't Sleepy Joe. That wasn't bowl of oatmeal Joe Biden. That was the previous Trump administration.
yeah, and
I
who knows
think
actually who started that, because those
right.
could be started anywhere in
Right.
whatever
So
administration.
Drew, you and I have deployed. You and I have done some time. I don't know if like because to what AK was saying earlier and what Mary was saying earlier about knowing all the information, OPSEC wise, there's a ton of like I know when I was overseas, if something I was involved in made the news, which didn't happen that often, but if it did, what my family saw was like 10% of what was actually going on. So I
It
think
was
that's something
all
that
over
I
the
also
board
keep
for
in
me.
mind
Yeah,
when I'm
'cause I
looking
was
at this.
part of
Yeah.
CENTCOM, ARCENT. I didn't know everything. Obviously, I
Yep.
knew my little piece of the pie thing of like what I reported on to the commanding general. Every 3 days or whatever. And when I was doing that, and when I wasn't talking, for my little like 5 seconds, ever it took to read my little paragraph, I was listening, because I'd be in these rooms where there'd be like 30 to 50 service members, all with 20 plus years of experience, and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of knowledge and wisdom and leadership in this room. So I would just sit there like a fly on the wall, and it was amazing to see. But yeah, going off what you're saying, David, is it would be completely different. We'd be doing these operations, or reporting it, just doing our normal job, call it normal job. But and there'd be something like, oh, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is huge. It's going to hit the news. It's going to be on like we always had like CNN and Fox and all of them on different screens. And then we would do something and be like, it didn't get on the news. It's like, are we supposed to say anything, not say anything? And then we just move on to the next, operation. Whereas on the other side, some little tiny thing like in whatever, Taiwan or something like that, and it would be like the biggest thing for 3 days. And it's like, that wasn't even anything. Yeah, I mean, one example I can definitely say was there was and it was like on the news, but barely, and it relates to Iran. Is we had there was a drone that was getting, I believe it was international waters, and it was getting close to Iranian border, and then Iran shot it down, and we were like, oh my gosh, this is going to be World War III. This is gonna be, and then it was just a blip. So it didn't turn anything. I'm sure behind the scenes, it's like, okay, let's not let that happen again, or something like that. But yeah, I know what you mean, David.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah,
speaking of things of that aren't big that hopefully turn into big things, or expecting things to turn into big things that aren't big things, the president of the United States addressed the nation just last week, and a bunch of corporate mainstream media decided not to carry his press, or not even press. It was just an address to the nation, the president of the United States. That's a whole other thing in and of itself. But what we came to find out is that there were some pretty serious allegations of the need to be able to crack down on securing our country when it comes to elections in this nation, and to follow up just to make sure that it's hopefully not just some more promises. Secretary of Department of Homeland Security, I should say, Markwayne Mullin, has announced election security crackdown after the Post, the New York Post, reveals DHS ID'd some 275,000 non-citizens registered to vote. So we're just going to kind of roll through this a little bit. David, take us through the story, my friend.
Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin on Friday is to announce new election security crackdowns after the Post a day earlier revealed the feds found at least 278,000 non-citizens registered to vote in U.S. federal elections. Mullin will address the Trump administration's efforts to secure American elections during an 11 a.m. news conference following the president's Thursday primetime speech to vulnerabilities with U.S. voting. Only Americans should be electing American leaders, Mullin said in a post on X, announcing the briefing in the speech. Trump confirmed the Post's reporting of the 278,000 illegal voter registrations, noting the full total could be far larger, and probably is.
Give me 1 second. I hate New York Post, how they drop down.
The shocking number is part of a DHS report that reveals just how vulnerable elections continue to be, Trump said in his speech. Trump further ordered DHS to notify every state about non-citizens on their voter rolls and direct them to remove all ineligible voters from the lists immediately. It is the highest ever publicly reported in U.S. history, but a source familiar with the information told the Post on Thursday it remains unclear how many of those registrants may have voted illegally.
Now I want to switch over to another story, which came from the next day after he had this press conference. Because again, you say a thing, it's great that everyone's all fired up about it, but like what actually is going to happen? So Secretary Mullen, he has vowed fines and even prison time for election officials that don't comply. And this specifically, the subline is that DHS Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen at a Friday press conference said election officials that don't make changes based on information they need to secure their elections will be held accountable. And then just want to let you kind of read the first couple of paragraphs, and we'll move on to a couple of other points about this.
Yeah, I have a face for radio. Homeland Security Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen on Friday said officials who don't cooperate with the administration's election security efforts may be slapped with fines and potentially prison time. If the election officials, once we gave them the information they need to secure their elections and they choose not to, then those individuals can be held accountable by fines, by penalties, and even depending on how far it goes, prison time, Mullen said during a press conference at the Eisenhower Executive Office building. Mullen also vowed that DHS would work to make our security enhancements mandatory for states. He promised to withhold federal election security grants until state officials take steps to the administration demanded, including running their voter registration list through a system that checks for non-citizen voters on the rolls.
Yeah, so just to no, we're good there. Yeah. So just to give people an understanding, if you live in a Democrat-run state with a Democrat Secretary of State, you're probably on that list that Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen is speaking about, like Minnesota, where our Secretary of State, Steve Simon, has refused to turn over our voter rolls to the Department of Justice. And you might say, well, how was that possible? Well, unless we can get a judge that issues an order saying that they have to turn over those rolls, they do not. We were hoping that maybe the Supreme Court would jump in on it. So we've been in this weird holding pattern. And so a bunch of states have agreed to open up their voter rolls and a bunch of states haven't. And so I think that this is that next step kind of forward. And I'm just kind of curious from all of your guys' perspective, like if we have this data and it sounds like it's pretty straightforward, regardless of who's voted or not, give me a good reason why a state would not turn over their voter rolls, not to just the Trump administration, not to President Trump's personal, account, but to the Department of Justice. What's even a reason? And I can't think of it other than if you think that they're going to like cook the books or something like that. But I'm kind of curious.
I just want to go real quick to the reason they did this. So it was a couple of news networks that said, we're not going to air this. And I think that was like strange to even begin with. And I think they're comparing it back to like a couple of years ago. They aired remember the Biden one with like the red lights?
Oh yes, that national address. Yeah,
that was around the same kind of time. And that the reason that they're giving for last week was we don't want to. They're doing it for midterms type deal. And this is around that same time where it's like, okay, well, you aired the Biden, scary red light Marines in the background kind of deal too. So yeah, that whole
his Emperor Palpatine speech, his "I'm taking over the galaxy" speech. I remember that.
Yeah,
that
it did feel like a very Palpatine-esque type deal. But yeah, and then you go into the whole election stuff, and yeah, we're entering some scary waters when it comes to that.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. What do you think, David? Can you give me an argument for why they wouldn't, or just tell me your honest thoughts on why you think?
I mean, listen. The only reason you don't want to enforce voter ID is so you can cheat, because chances are wherever it is that you live, in spite of the amount of soy latte drinking, blue hair, ears gauged out to like level 20 population, you're not going to win the election because there's way more people living in the middle that don't want the policies that you're So you have to lean on the illegal vote because they, want to stay here, and you're the group that's going to let them and use them to launder money. Allegedly. Can't prove any of that. Certainly looks that way. USAID definitely made it look that way. I think that's the primary reason. I will say, just from the libertarian lean, I could see the argument being made that this could be used politically, depending on which party is in power, right? To target your political opposition, whether it's the people who vote Democrat or the people who vote Republican. So I can see where some people might not like it for that reason, but overall, just asking people to verify their status as citizens, it shouldn't be that radical.
No, I agree. What about you, Drew, man? What are your thoughts as someone that, you've served your country, but you're not like really following the law or rule about like how
voting
this is all
ID
working?
stuff I really don't get, because now I think it was my mom a couple months ago. It's like she couldn't get into her Facebook without showing an ID, like scanning her driver's license and stuff like that. So it's like that's what it was. She couldn't send a message, so she couldn't use Messenger on Facebook without sending or scanning in an ID. I'm like, while we are not requiring ID to vote when it comes to that stuff. So yeah, everywhere we're required to do ID. To get a Walmart gift card requires an ID now. But yeah, and then we'll get into the wheel of news later and talk a little bit about Olive Garden possibly.
And that's the part that doesn't make any sense, is all the things that require, and Dr. Bowden, maybe you can weigh in on this, like the amount of prescriptions you have to have an ID to pick up, and even over the counter stuff you're buying at like Target or Walgreens. Everything else takes an ID.
You have to show your ID to get into a rated R movie. So, but yeah, and I am super uninformed on this topic as well. But I did have this interesting conversation today. I met with somebody that ran for Congress, and he created an app to help get out, you can connect it to your phone. All your contacts come into the phone. And then you can figure out, you can kind of nudge all your friends to vote. And his is very privacy friendly. It's very conscious of people's, they only store the voter ID number, and they don't store a lot of data. But there's another app called Abbott Impact, and I downloaded it on my phone, and all of a sudden I was able to tell all my friends who, if they're a Democrat or Republican, when they voted in the last primary, it was shocking that the amount of, I'm like, oh, she's a Democrat? I had no idea. So I don't know if maybe, the other side's using that. I mean, the ID thing seems like, common sense. I guess turning over their voter rollouts, maybe there's a privacy concern. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm with you, Doctor. Because I feel like I'm in the middle there somewhere, where it's just like, we need to do this stuff to show that you're a citizen to vote in our country. But at the same time, do we need to give all of our information, our medical information, our past voting record, all, because everything asks for that all the time. Like all these little terms and conditions that seems like, and they're updating constantly. It's like, hey, another new email saying that we've updated this, and now you got to click this one to say that now we have to are sharing with our affiliates, and so it's really scary to me. I don't know where I'm supposed to lean on. We're supposed to follow the rules of the Constitution and maintain a good country, but at the same time, are we supposed to lose all of our privacy, especially when it comes to our medical information too, which can relate to voting?
Yeah, that's been my biggest pushback on anything Trump administration related, not to frustrate AK at all, but my only pushbacks politically on anything being done has always been, all right, so when the pendulum swings the other way and we have a Democrat in the White House and we have a Democrat majority Senate or House, how can this be used against conservatives the way they weaponized the government against conservatives?
Well, then we change all of our names to Muhammad Ali or Ali Muhammad.
Gee whiz. All right. Anyways, no. I still want to go to heaven.
Thinking about that, because wow, other people from other countries, they have all the same name, or fine, David. We can all be John Smith, or
we gotta be John
I'll
Smith.
take it.
But
Yeah, well,
here's
'cause
what I'll
remember
say
the
though,
movie
like
Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and it's like they're like, run a background check, figure out all this on what? John Smith, you know? So
well, so
John
here's the
Doe.
thing, right? I think it's very important to be clear. What the Department of Justice is asking for, what the Trump administration is asking for from different states is that they just give over a copy of their voter file. So what that will do is show here's all the people that are registered to vote in our state. And some people say, well, why don't we have that already federal? Well, because we do not have a national one vote. We have 50 states and 6 territories that each conduct elections, and that is a good thing. I think it's a good thing.
and
But
it's
the
up,
bad,
correct me if I'm wrong, it's up to the states, the individual states, how they do it, right?
right? So there's federal law about making sure to do certain types of things, but it's we don't want one kind of. I mean, I kind of at this point where I actually do want federal election, but my point is that I don't think that it's a good thing to force states to do things unless we actually change the law. But in this case, there is no downside to a state giving over their voter rolls other than they have dead people and illegal aliens that are registered to vote. Now, does that mean that they're voting? No, and that's a fair question and analysis. Just because you're registered to vote doesn't mean that you are. But let me ask you this. If you found out that in Minnesota there was 40,000 people who were either non-citizens or dead that were on the voter rolls that received 5 absentee ballots in the mail, and you did not have proof that those 5 absentee ballots were ever destroyed, because in the state of Minnesota, in order to track someone down, it takes a lot of forensic analysis to tell, did someone turn in that ballot? And then what if you found out that a bunch of people that were dead or non-citizens, that yes, they in fact requested a bunch of absentee ballots, they're registered to vote, and based off analysis, they actually registered, they actually turned in their ballot. And I think that's what states are afraid of. So that's just my last piece about, about privacy and all that. I agree with all that stuff. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to take a judge or the Supreme Court to force these states to turn over the rolls, because it's, in my opinion, it is a civil rights issue. If a state is not actually following the law and checking, then we actually can't trust a state like California. Do we trust California? I don't trust California. I don't even trust Minnesota, and I live here.
Well,
I
and
want
then
someone else to verify it.
Kind of like what you're saying is who polices the police, internal affairs, who checks on voting rules for California compared to Minnesota to Texas. All of our jobs, I'm sure, Doctor, like you have audits to make sure that your institution is doing the correct thing. So it's going to be a wild ride, because it's a political thing where every different administration is going to have a different opinion on it. So, and we're
100%.
as citizens, we're stuck in the middle here. So, but yeah, we can handle that in the following weeks as midterms kind of roll up. But let's talk a little bit about the Tate brothers and what they've been up to.
Yeah, this is David's role models here. They've been arrested.
Don't put that out into the world. Oh my God!
Once again, Andrew, Andrew and Tristan Tate. Whatever you think about them,
I'm gonna get you for that. I don't know what it's gonna be, but I'm gonna get you for that.
They're interesting people, regardless of what you think about their overall guilt on things. But they have been arrested, and so this story just kind of breaks down what is occurring here. They were arrested on Saturday in Miami after UK prosecutors said that they brought further rape and sex trafficking charges against them. So go ahead and kind of read for us what is happening here.
Careful with this terminology. And
right.
Yeah, I'm using this is AP approved. It is not my opinion. It's not our opinion. This is just what they literally were charged with. So.
We're reading an article, yes. Also, real quick before I get started, I just want to quote the great Michael Knowles when he talked about the Tate brothers, and he said a broken clock can be right twice a day. So while 90%, maybe 99.9% of what they say is absolute garbage and nonsense, every once in a while they find a sliver of truth. You can't live life without running into the truth every once in a while. Anyways, London influencer brothers Andrew and Tristan Tate were arrested Saturday in Miami after UK prosecutors said they brought further assault and sex trafficking charges against them. Britain's Crown Prosecution Service said the new charges relate to 4 further victims and were brought after authorities received evidence from Bedfordshire Police in southeastern England. The charges include rape, assault, trafficking, and offenses related to indecent images of a child and extreme adult content. The charges announced Saturday, which bring the total number of alleged victims in the UK to 7, are the latest in a long-running international legal saga involving the brothers that has spanned the US, Britain, and Romania. The brothers have denied wrongdoing. An attorney for the brothers, Joseph McBride, blasted the latest charges as filth and slander in a phone interview Sunday. He said he was confident the extradition request would ultimately be denied. And do we want to read the here? No, we don't need. We know who the Tate brothers are.
People know who they are and what they're about. But yeah,
they've made sure of it. Comes from this is they have dual citizenship. So in UK and is it Hungary as well?
Austria.
And so,
or maybe it's Hungary. I don't
Romania.
know.
Sorry,
Romania. Sorry. We're just gonna throw all the Baltic states in there and shots fired.
But anyways, they're in the U.S. The U.S. has ties to these countries. Extradition. That's kind of how it went down. U.S. Marshals rolled in and be like, "This is what we have." They probably already knew it was coming, and it just was a formal thing. From what I saw, I watched Patrick Bet David talk about it on Valuetainment this morning, and yeah, I mean that's all I know about it, and.
Yeah, I guess here's my thing. I have always thought that the Tate brothers, much to what you're saying, David, I've always thought that they were almost everything they said was in poor taste. Even if they sometimes will align on certain aspects, like, of course, I don't believe that masculinity is toxic. I think it's absurd. It's how God created us and all these different things. But I've always thought that the way that they tried to get their message across to people was to like appeal to the worst parts, I would say, of our humanity, because I believe that God gave us this gift of life and created us in his image, and Jesus Christ came and told us how we should live. I think that we should try and emulate that as much as possible. And one of the things that does not do that is to like treat women like, hey, I'm the big dog on campus. You got to do what I got to do. Listen, you got to do what I say you got to do because I'm the alpha that's making all the things. Like, I agree that you should lead your household. I've been married for 22 years, but a lot of the stuff that I'd hear come from the Tate brothers, that then I would hear regurgitated from young men that I would run into, I'm like, bro, that is a recipe for loneliness. And honestly, good luck having like a family or like reproducing at all. But you know what? Some of these people are like die hard.
From what
like
I've seen,
putting all this money.
It's a pendulum swing from all the DEI, the ESG in the last 10 years, and so that's how you get somebody like Andrew Tate. Where it's a different version of like a Jordan Peterson or a Trump or something like that. It's just like you're gonna have these more extreme personalities, and like you said, AK,
I would throw them more in the line of feminists.
Well,
you got your red pill movement and you got your feminists, and they're literally just polar opposites, and they're both saying hate the other side. They're both saying die alone with cats.
I'm not a fan of all that, so it's like I could see. I don't know. I don't know if I just see things in second and third order effects. Sounds like you are doing the same, AK, with what you just said. It's just like, careful, guy. Don't take these things too far. You can. Listen to stuff. I've never listened to an Andrew Tate video of just the modified versions with gym music and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, not really my thing. But yeah, young guys, you have to be careful to not go one way or the other too far.
Go ahead, Dr. Bowden.
I have 4 boys, 4 teenagers. And
please enlighten us.
Yeah, to my horror, one of them was starting to really take a liking to Andrew Tate and was starting to get sucked into all that. So I sent him that news when it came out and braced myself for the reaction, and was just so relieved to hear him say, well, yeah, I don't agree with him with much of him anymore. Like, he's starting to wake up. Like, like David said, there's some good little things in there, teaching men to be, tough, but it's going too far. And so that was my own little personal experience with
that's great. Yeah. You got to know when to leave the party. The whole thing is, nothing good happens after midnight. So it's like, okay, yeah, when I was in college, we'd all go out to the bars, and I used to have the most respect for the women that would go out and hang out, and we'd have a big table, and people are ordering drinks and shots, and then they would sip on their drink, and then when the shots would come, they'd be like, "No, I'm good," or "I'm gonna wait an hour," and stuff like that. And I always I'm
I
like,
threw
"That's
mine
awesome."
under the table.
Yeah, and then there'd be another girl that would be on the table, and everyone has their different tolerances, and
No,
gotta wake
I
up.
don't drink them. I say
No, she wasn't saying she's under the table.
Literally
Drew.
throwing it away because you're not taking
Yeah.
the shots.
I take it and then I just kind of.
I found that out too. Some women were doing that. That they want you to buy them drinks, and then they'd be like, "All right, no, I'm not going to drink this one." And it was wild. But anyways, yeah, going back to what you're saying about your sons, yeah, but you got to raise them to critically think and know when to kind of get off the roller coaster. It's fun for a little bit, but knowing where you're, need to take a break.
And I think that there is a certain level, to your point as well, David, that we went so culturally far to the left into this feminist movement that I believe is anti-God. It's anti the way that we are supposed to be created as God's creatures, to be able to have families and be able to raise good men and women into good, productive members of society. And so this is like the counter shock to that system. Do I think that it did a good enough job? Because sometimes you need like that shock and awe. I do. So I respect that they were bold and loud enough to really shock the core, which got a lot of people to say, okay, well, let's listen. But as I say with everything, you have to be critical, and you can go too far to one way to basically push your grift or whatever your ultimate objective is. So you always have to be very critical when someone comes and claims that they have all the answers for you. It's like, well, no, you don't. But thank you for shocking the system and shocking our cores to at least get us to wake up. And I think we've done pretty good. We've moved away from a lot of like the downside effects of what I think feminism has been. We'll see. I mean, our birth and replacement rate is awful right now. But yeah, we can talk more about that a future show.
I just always like
Conservatives are to blame for that as well, because I remember watching Rachel Wilson on Joe Rogan talking about how conservative women get on her case when she's doing her public speaking, because she talks about how it's more important to to be a stay-at-home wife and raise kids or and then have your career after. And they're all like, well, what about the GDP? So it's not just the feminists that are making the birth rate a problem. It's also the right being all about the GDP. Like, that's not the most important thing. When we get to heaven, we're not going to be scaled on how well we attribute it to the GDP of the country.
No, you're not.
I was watching a Few Good Men movie over the weekend, and it's Kevin Bacon. It's such a good role for like Kevin Bacon in that one, where he's a Marine. It has to do, a lot of these people in it are the Marines on the forward and against. And then Tom Cruise, Navy guy, attorney, Jag, is just like he's like, I've had it with you guys, you Marines, and this and that, because, they're more on the extreme side of the branches. And he's like, don't lump me in with those guys that took it way too far just because we're wearing the same uniform. And that just reminded me of that. It's like, okay, you can respect Andrew Tate's kickboxing prowess, but maybe not on the female.
Maybe he got hit in the head a few
times. Good to line, be
times.
like, this is what I'm okay with, this is what I'm not. But yeah, let's talk data centers.
Yeah, so I think this is becoming one of the most interesting, I would say, moving targets politically, to the point that back in January, I was talking with back in May with members of the RNC team, and we were talking about what's going on in your states, kind of strategizing about going into the midterms. And a couple of members raised their hand and said, what should our position be on data centers? It's like, we don't have one yet. And it was like, a lot of people got super fired up, and they're like, well, what do you mean we don't have a position yet? And it's like, well, our position is that we need to be competitive with China. So to that point, I think it's interesting to go from there until today in this article that I was able to find, that this has become a pretty important issue that we need to find a way to kind of, I think, really address the core issues from the side that the Trump administration takes. And we'll get into that a little bit. But Fortune magazine, power companies are using eminent domain to seize land for data centers, as 70% of Americans say, not in my backyard. So we'll start right here. And tell us what's going on in this story, David.
The artificial intelligence boom in the United States is being matched by a data center building boom. There are more than 3,000 data centers in the US and another 1,500 in development, according to a Pew Research Center analyst. While President Donald Trump has promoted AI advancement, calling it crucial to economic and national security, polling shows that 7 in 10 Americans oppose the construction of AI data centers in their communities, citing higher utility bills, pollution, noise, and the loss of green space. These centers, which hold computer servers that process words, images, and lines of code for large language models such as ChatGPT, also use high amounts of water and electricity. There is a growing opposition to the infrastructure surrounding them, to particularly the transmission lines needed to power them, which often must cross land belonging to private citizens. When private citizens refuse to sell their land, companies are turning to eminent domain, the government's inherent power to seize private property without a landowner's consent. But does a line built to serve a public data center qualify? And then it looks like the author has some of their own opinions thrown in there.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing with when this comes to me is the financial part, because like this is starting to remind me of when you talk eminent domain, is the railroads in the early times during this country. Is like, okay, manifest destiny, we're going to push there's a president's intent and aligned with God's to reach the other side of the country. And how are we going to do that? Then it comes like, how? Oh, the most technology we have right now is railroads. So that those railroads were going through people's properties. There, people went out west. They're like, oh yeah, go experience the whole country, get some land, and it's all yours. And then not too long later, they come in with railroads and be like, and that's what kind of led to the Jesse James and be like, what are you doing? And then aligned with the banks. So then you have the banks as well. And then, I don't particularly like kind of now where this is going, but at the same time, everyone is relying on AI right now. It's in everybody's job. It's in the schools now. I guess I heard not to divert too much, is just like now law schools are saying, okay, no more AI. You actually have to learn the law, and not just use, language models to just beat your test or set it up. So it's a tough time right now. And then going into the financial aspect of, okay, now the average person now has to pay higher utilities based on data centers that are going to be using water and other electricity.
Yeah, I personally think my biggest beef when it comes to the data center argument is that I, on one hand, can understand that we do not want to allow large corporations to basically bilk working class Americans for this thing that is clearly aligned with President Trump's national security goals. And I just think that we have to be leery of that. The days of, oh, we just trust corporations is, which Republicans had for basically all of the 90s and 80s, is an awful, awful plan. Just because in the same way that you can't trust any individual to act out of just pure altruism when their own bottom line is at risk, we have to hold corporations to that same idea. But President Trump slammed the New York data center moratorium, which was signed by Democrats because they've started to pick this as one of their issue, as a terrible decision, while Bill Ackman points to AI race with China and says democracy is at risk. I just wanted to read this one part just to understand that, again, this is becoming this weird political issue where the Trump administration is like, we need data centers to be able to compete with China. And if we are not going to compete with them, we will lose the data center battle. We will lose the AI battle. And if the CCP is in charge of AI in the world, look out, because they will use it to destroy us. And so I think it's interesting from that perspective. And I'm not trying to say that I am 100% in board with everything that's been going on with these data center conversations, but I just think that we need to be very, again, critical of how we look at this issue. Can we understand that there has been 100% an anti-data center kind of, if you want to say, sentiment that I think has been seeded by the CCP. So even though if you might agree with certain aspects of like, yeah, I don't think that we should allow these corporations to bilk us, we should find a way to make sure that they're not just passing off their costs. We also at the same time can't be just so like lost in the sauce that were like, nope, we don't care. Let China have all the AI controls and we're going to do what we
Yeah,
want.
because then it goes more towards the space race. So like with Russia, when it came to, landing on the moon or getting the moon or whatever they thought we were going to do early on, how it came to that. Dr. Bowden, what's your stance on AI and related to this?
Well, I'll preface this by saying I've never seen one of these data centers, but remember how big computers used to be, and now they're tiny. Is there a way to make these data centers more compatible? Can we put them underground? Can we use AI to solve the problem that we can make these data centers so they're just not this monstrosity that takes up all this land and energy? And I mean, it seems to me, we used to have to deal with these ginormous computers, and now we've come a long way. Why don't we do the same thing with these data centers?
I like it, but let's put it on Mars or the moon.
Well, I was going to say, I was just thinking out loud.
Underwater?
Musk loves AI. Why don't we put the
James
centers
Cameron.
in space?
Space, yeah.
We need to use all this water to cool them anyways. It's cold in space. Like
Yeah,
that
we're
is
no
out of
water.
You know what's funny? That's literally the
Nope.
plan. So Elon
No
wants
water
to
required.
put data centers and chip manufacturing plants on the moon. So it's funny because Elon wants to go to Mars, but he understands that the utility of the moon is that it's low gravity. We can build a bunch of stuff up there, and the way that we can transmit power, they're continually working on basically like Wi-Fi solar, which is a whole thing in and of itself. But that's what the idea is like we need to literally start building data centers on the moon, have these wireless relays so we can just, dot the moon, because you're not going to see it anyways, and it's not going to take up nearly as much in resources.
It really
But in
does
order to
feel
get
like
there, we
we're
have to
coming out
advance
of
ourselves more.
at this point.
Right. So I have a
know,
couple of
it's like-
pushbacks.
Yeah.
How do you try to explain, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to yourself 20 years ago? So it's like, I'm with
Right.
you, okay? Like there might be a way to have it long range Wi-Fi on the moon. I don't know. What were you
I
saying, David?
think. Well, I was just gonna say, I think I agree. We need to compete with China. We can't let them be the dominant force in the AI space. AI's here; it's not going anywhere, unfortunately. Now the question becomes, how far do we let it go before it, overtakes humans actually living a human life? But on the other side of it, I side with America's sweetheart since Caitlin Clark left the NBA, Sophie Cunningham, and she took to X a couple of days ago and took a very hard stance against data centers, saying we need to save our farmland and stop these dumb data centers. Now, she might just, be a basketball player. She's not an AI genius or an expert in tech, but I agree with that. I also noted, I was looking this up, Aaron Brockovich has also come out against data centers being built. And I think to the poll we're looking at, and even to your point, AK, about like maybe the CCP is pushing some of this anti-data center ideology, this country is still supposed to be the will of the people. And if I want to be able to take my kids to a park, but now the park is gone because you built a data center because you took the land to build said data center because there was already flowing water there. There was a river there, so you had your water for cooling the data center. That's not the will of the people anymore. And I think if we want to put data centers on the moon, on Mars, even in space stations floating around the planet, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But I think if the American people, and I know a bunch of people in my own personal life that are, some are pro data centers, some are like, yeah, we should have them, but I don't want to have them here. Those aren't concerns that we can ignore. And kind of like the Iran conflict, these are things that if in the Conservative Party we don't dive into these conversations and actually hear people out about why they don't want data centers in their backyards, we're going to lose the midterms. And we might not see another win like what Trump had for in our lifetime.
Yeah,
It is
for
good
years.
to hear Democrats, leftists, liberals talk about actual policy things like related to data centers rather than ideology, like individual ideology. So
ironically, it's the one time Democrats sound rational
against data centers from the
Yeah.
left, and I'm like, okay, let's talk about that. Let's have a conversation, because that's actually something that can get results one way or the other.
Yeah.
But yeah. We'll follow this story and a few other ones, but let's dive into our guest. I've been waiting to talk with you. I think we've been on quite a few X spaces together. And let's start from the beginning. Dr. Bowden, tell us how you got into this.
Okay, yeah, the saga. I'm an ear, nose, and throat sleep medicine specialist. I'm independent. I call myself third party free because I don't contract with the government or insurance companies or hospitals. And I worked in a small private practice for 7 years when I got out of residency. And then I started having kids, and I had 4 boys in 5 years, and I couldn't keep it up. So I quit. I quit being a doctor, and I wasn't even sure I was going to go back. But then once the kids got settled into school, I kind of had an itch that needed to be scratched. I decided to go back into practice, but I decided I was going to do it on my own terms and do this new model of practicing medicine where you don't take insurance. It's basically fee for service. All the prices are on the website, and I had a very quiet little practice. And then I started seeing COVID patients showing up. And I remember thinking, well, this won't really affect me. You saw it on the news, right? I'm like, well, this won't be a problem for me because this will be the hospitals. And then, but I had this relationship with a lab that was already doing PCR testing for sinusitis. So they do a PCR test for bacterial and fungal infections in the sinuses, which was actually great because prior to that, we would just throw the strongest antibiotic we could at patients that didn't get better. And that usually was like Levaquin, which has a lot of side effects. And so this was sort of a breakthrough way to really pinpoint what was going on in the sinuses. And then they came out with a PCR saliva test for COVID. And so that was great because you didn't have to have a swab up the nose. And they also could give us the results back the next day. And you might remember early on, it took 2 weeks to get the results back. LabCorp was the first lab in the country to have the COVID test. And they got so slammed that it was taking 2 weeks to get the results back. So we started using this saliva test, and that's what put my little practice on the map in Houston, because we became known as a place you could go get that test, get it back the next day. So people that need it for work or travel, we were in high demand for that. And I didn't have a lot of demand for treatment initially, but in the people that asked for it, I did start using hydroxychloroquine. But as soon as Trump came out and said how great it was, this Texas State Board of Pharmacy literally prohibited us from prescribing it. Wow. And we also weren't allowed to prescribe a Z-Pak early on, which a Z-Pak is an antibiotic, azithromycin. It's super safe. But they prohibited us from doing that. So I kind of put those on the back burner and focused more on testing. And then monoclonal antibodies came about, and I used those, and they worked really well. We'd have people get better the next day. And initially I could get as many doses as I wanted. They'd come to my office the next day. And then the government took over distribution. Initially, it was the drug companies sending it directly to our offices.
Yeah, let me hit on that real quick right there, because that was a big thing that I learned later on with the vaccines was you can't really do that if there's a treatment. But early on, just like you're saying right now, there were treatment options that were being explored and tried. And then like the heavy hammer kind of came down.
Yeah. And it was all very coordinated. It was not accidental. So the government took over distribution, and this was in the summer of 2021. So this was following the rollout of the COVID shot. And actually the third and largest surge of the pandemic was fall of 2021. And that's when monoclonal antibodies basically went away and Biden mandated the shot. So I believe it was very purposeful. And at the same time, they also did a smear campaign on ivermectin. So that infamous horse tweet that came out, that was late August 2021.
Yeah, let me put in the timeline there. You ask about my story. I went into the hospital May of 2021, numbness, tingling, couldn't lift anything, falling over, paralyzed. They tested for everything. Everything came back negative, what they looked for. But then doing the lumbar puncture, the spinal tap, saw the I believe spike proteins. And they're like, yep, Guillain-Barré syndrome, Russian and that, where I spent, 2 months in the neurological ICU, intubated for a week. And then, like you're saying, with that timeline around that July, August time, I was in the hospital at the Minneapolis VA. And I'm waiting to get treatment and stuff. And they, like you said, they put a kibosh on all the treatment, and that's when things got out of hand.
Well, yeah. So you got COVID so you had the COVID shot, and then you got the Guillain-Barré.
I had the COVID shot, 2 from the VA, Pfizer, 2 weeks apart. And then right afterwards got the diagnosis of Guillain-Barré in that May time. And then, you asked about COVID. I didn't get COVID until a year later.
Okay.
And they gave me tests every 2 weeks. Like every time I needed to do something, even to go to a different wing of the hospital, I needed to have a clear COVID test and wait 2 weeks and go through all the motions, and even to get family members to come visit and stuff. Longer story, but yes. And then a year later, I did get COVID, and that was a walk in the park compared to the GBS.
And did anybody ever entertain the possibility that you got Guillain-Barré from the COVID shots?
No, not in the hospital. No, they didn't connect the dots. I asked questions. When I couldn't even speak. I had the tracheostomy, the pass-through air valve, all the stuff. And no, we would ask questions, and they would either just fall in line with the narrative, or I could tell by their eyes, or they're like, can't talk about it, type deal. And then there was, like you said, on that timeline, there was a point where medical staff were being required to get the vaccine. And I knew all of my people. That's all I could do, is like look at my staff and get to know them, because I was being treated 24/7. So I had like 3 8-hour shifts of people. And I noticed, like, hey, where did so-and-so go? And they're like, oh, they moved on to a different role. And that was right when it was required for medical staff to have the shot.
So people were leaving because of the mandate?
Refused to get it. Yeah, the nurses, aides, doctors, whoever it was, were refusing to get it. So, yeah.
So I assume none of the people taking care of you reported your situation to VAERS.
I assume they did. They did not. And I ended up having to do that myself years later, after I was like sick of it, put up with it. Is there any hope for anything? And fortunately, talking to people like Brianne Dressen, who we've had on the show, founder of React 19, they're like, yes, file all this stuff, the CICP, VIC, whatever you can, VAERS, and then let the lawyers figure it out. And now it seems like we're coming up on this like different, now it's been too long. Now it's 5 years. Now it's whatever.
Well, there is one avenue of recourse, actually, and the statute of limitations does not expire till 2028. The people that gave you the shot, did you tell them it was a VA, right? It was
yes,
the military.
Yeah.
Now, maybe I don't know the situation there, but I will
it's all up in the air.
But with private or non-military, at least they had to sign a contract with the government that they would report conditions that happened after these shots to VAERS. And it's a legally binding contract. And if you came back after your shot with these diagnoses and they did not report it to VAERS, you can sue them. And we can do class action suits. So, we can get multiple people in one hospital suing that could take down the hospital. And that statute of limitations does not expire until 2028.
Okay. Well, we'll talk offline and get a plan going.
Yeah.
Because there's other people in my similar situation that we just have unanswered questions. And unfortunately, right now, the topic is disappearing from the public eye through these other things, through Iran, through the midterms, through what else is going on.
People have a short memory.
It's slowly like fading away, just because it's like, let's move on. Both with the people that don't want to talk about it, be like, let's move on. That was a thing that we did that closed the whole country for all this time, jobs, school, daycares, all this stuff. But let's just forget about that. But then on the other side, the people that do care about this topic, they're like, what else can we do at this point? We have to keep moving on.
Well,
it's like,
right. Yeah. Speaking of people who care about this topic, we got a couple of live chats here. I just wanted to throw these up, and maybe Dr. Bowden can respond to these. So real quick from Melinda, I am not going to insult you by trying to do your last name. I am fully assimilated immigrant, and my foreign languages are not that great. So I'm not going to do that. Her first comment here, they are not vaccines. It was poison. Comment number 2 here is just, I'm a veteran. The VA doesn't care. Here's a Band-Aid and some Tylenol. Go walk it off. I think every veteran's experienced that at least once in their life when it comes to that. And then the last one was just a, my goodness, Drew, with some prayer hands praying for you and what you're dealing with.
I have my most memorable COVID patient was a veteran who tried to get help at the VA when he got sick with COVID and got super frustrated because he wasn't getting anywhere. So he came to me. He was in his late 50s, 2 heart attacks in the past, history of throat cancer, came into my office with an oxygen saturation of 66%. And I'd never seen anything like that. And normally I would have called the ambulance, but he was like, I'm not going to the hospital. So, I mean, I had to potentially let him die in my office. But we threw the kitchen sink at him, and we didn't have monoclonal antibodies. This is after the government took them away. And he survived. We brought him in every single day, and he still texts me regularly, with updates. But he,
that's incredible.
Yeah, he talked about how the VA basically slammed the door in his face when he was trying to get help during COVID.
The only reason I didn't think I was crazy when it came to all this and just like, no, it can't be this. They kept saying it could be anything. It could be any viral infection. It could be any, whatever. And I'm like, I got it 2 weeks before, I got this new thing. And I don't know if you heard this story from me before, but they actually had in my, okay, that's where I was going with this. The reason I didn't think I was crazy, because I did have one doctor in the VA, a completely different, not connected to any of that stuff. And she's like, how did this happen? Like, she was actually really asking me probing questions and wanted, and at that point I was just like, here I am for another appointment that I'm going to appointments 5 times a week. And she's like, you got this right after the shot. She was like, she saw my records, and even in my records, it looks like A to B to C to a clear line, but no other person in the VA was saying, here's what happened. But anyway, so, and then she's like, okay, well, it says you got GBS from the flu. And I'm like, that is not even the flu shot. They said from influenza. And I'm like, that is not correct at all. I need, will you change that right now? She's like, I can't do it. You got to go to your primary. And so I actually recorded a little video before I walked in for my appointment. I'm like, because at that time they were saying, oh, you're here for your whatever, your GI stuff. Are you ready for your COVID and flu shot? And I'm like, booster? I'm like, no. And I kept having to say that, like, because I was going in multiple times a week. And after a while, I would just say, are you, and this is actually after I was on Twitter Space and stuff and hearing everybody else's stories. And so I said, I'm like, are you getting compensated for this? Are you getting paid to ask me that? Have you seen my records? Because they told me that you are allergic to vaccines. Do not get any more vaccines. So I'd have conflicting doctors at the VA say, oh, no, you should get them. Oh, no, you shouldn't. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do here? And so they eventually stopped doing that. But like I said, I recorded a little video. I'm like, I'm about to go into the VA for my normal appointment, and they're going to ask, and I'm going to tell them, I did not get GBS from the flu. I got it 2 weeks after I got the COVID shots from the VA, and the LPN was able to change that right there. They couldn't do a drop down of GBS, but they said anaphylaxis, different stuff. And I'm like, please don't say, I'm like, that is inaccurate information. I did not have the flu. I did not get the flu shot. I got the COVID shot and then GBS. And then just to update everybody, recently I had an EMG. It's this nerve conduction electric probes that go into your nerves, muscles, and it shows the destruction of kind of where it's at. And unfortunately, it's still very prevalent, hence why I can't walk and my feet are still paralyzed. But they've upgraded from GBS to CIDP, chronic inflammatory polyneuropathy. Demyelinating polyneuropathy. So now I have the chronic version of GBS for the rest of my life. So
do you have pain?
Yes, constant. I'm in pain right now. Constant nerve pain, burning, but not all about me. Let's hear more about you. Do you guys got any questions at the moment for?
Yeah, no, I followed a lot of what was happening during COVID because, yeah, I got a bachelor degree in political science, so I'm not like a medical doctor, but I do believe that a lot of these studies are published in a way that if you have, just general comprehensive skills, you can understand things. And right from the jump with COVID, I was so fascinated with how you would see kind of here's what the accepted, approved kind of line is for something, and then you would see a study come out, and then it would just get shot down and retractions. And I started to track that early on, where I'm like, what is happening? What is going on? And especially down in Texas, because that's where you practice medicine, right? Dr. Bowden is down in Texas.
Mhm.
You guys were, because I think, for the good and the bad, there was a lot of folks that were willing, because of state law and things like that, to be able to be more, hey, this is what we do during pandemics. Like, it's all hands on deck from the medical community, and we're just going to try and do the thing that we're all highly educated and trained on, and we're going to see what works. We're going to come together. But the moment that Texas started to do that, and you started to see all of these doctors come up with these interesting therapeutics, it got shut down. And it was like, what is happening? Why aren't we going through the normal course of studying? So I'm just curious, from your perspective, what was it? What was that moment where you're like, this is not like how it's supposed to be?
Well, I think Houston was sort of ground zero for COVID drama. We have the largest medical center in the entire world. And the hospital that I butted heads with was the first hospital in the country to mandate the shots. And I believe it was chosen very purposefully. I believe they knew if they could get away with it in Texas, they could get away with it anywhere. So Houston Methodist mandated it on April 1st, 2021, and that was 5 months before Biden. And I had privileges there, but I had never, I'm outpatient. I just had them just in case. I never admitted a patient there. I was not an integral part of that hospital, but I started speaking out against mandates on social media. And at the time, I'd get like 5 likes on a post. I did not have a following. But on a single day, I posted 25 times, vaccine mandates are wrong. And then I put a patient testimonial from an email. And that's when they went after me, and they suspended my privileges, and they went to the press to announce it. So I found out that my privileges were suspended from the Houston Chronicle. And then the next thing I know, CNN, Washington Post, they're all coming after me. And it was basically to set an example and to silence other doctors. But I think it's just interesting how I think Houston was chosen. I think healthcare is turning our state blue. And I don't know if you saw a post I put on X recently about how healthcare is the #1 employer for the vast majority of states now. And it used to be manufacturing. And to me, it's also symbolic of, our system as a whole. And is this the influx of socialism or communism? Because healthcare is not very free market, right? It's very tied in with the government. The government has such a heavy hand in healthcare, and now healthcare is dominating our jobs and our economy in a way that, it didn't used to at all.
Oh yeah, you said that they controlled, they took over the means of distribution, and that sounds very much like controlling the means of production. So you got production and distribution, and in an emergency too, and that's usually where these don't let a good catastrophe go to waste type mentality. And it's such a wild time. And you hear about doing the 9/11 investigation and the January 6th investigation. And it's just like, I kept waiting to have a 2020 investigation or a 2021 or a COVID full like, that's what we would do in the military. It's just like any mission, we would say what was supposed to happen, what did happen, what could we improve on, and what went well, and notes for the next time. And we haven't had any of that in the last 5-6 years.
Well, and the same with medicine. We have something called M&M, morbidity and mortality. So when things go wrong, you convene in a big group, and you basically, the poor doctor has to stand up there and admit what he or she did wrong, and then the group weighs in, and it's like supposed to be this learning experience and growth experience. And we also would have something called Journal Club, where we would regularly, every week, debate all these journal articles. And it was very collegial and very educational. And, that sort of disappeared. We can't have any debate. We can't get the other side to debate with us. The doctors like myself, they just stonewall us. They're basically above us. They can't lower themselves to engage in any kind of conversation with us. So we're in a bad spot. And the other thing that's tying into the AI. So Amazon now provides doctor's appointments through AI. That you get your first 5 visits for free.
Wow.
And
I was just about to mention that. You said pharmaceutical, medicine for employers and stuff like that. But now we have tech as well. So now, like you're about to mention, it seems like, is we're tying that in, medical and AI, going back to our dentist status too. It's just like, where are we going from here?
Right. And so the AMA is freaking out because they don't want doctors to lose their jobs. So now AMA is trying to create a billing code for these AI visits so that it can still make money, that the medical profession can still make money, but they're going to use AI to, handle patient care. And then, my other point was I put a poll out yesterday.
I saw that.
Who do you trust more, AI or a doctor? And 2/3 of the respondents said AI.
Yep.
But then it makes me wonder, maybe that's why they're not trying to, there hasn't been a reckoning. They don't care that the public doesn't trust doctors because it's cheaper and more efficient to use AI as doctors. And so they'd rather have people turn to AI. And it's one more reason why they can just pretend COVID never happened and not worry about restoring trust.
Yeah. And here's the thing that is fascinating. And I know that sometimes in my questions, I ramble on, but for you, it sounds like there was a point in which you noticed that this was different. This was a different way than you as a trained medical doctor would approach a typical kind of event like this, where people started to change. And it's like, you're not even having debates. It's like, this is what we have to do. And if you don't, you're a killer. And you kind of basically pushed back against that and said, we should never mandate vaccines. I'm curious, from that point forward, did you see, I guess, other consequences? I know that recently I saw that Attorney General Ken Paxton, he's running to do something different, that he, supported you at some way, shape, or form about your constitutional rights. I'm just kind of curious, if you fast forward, are you still fighting that same battle, or are people trying to sweep it under the rug? Because you're a person who's very honest and candid about what you see is not happening that should be happening. And I'm just kind of curious, like, are people just really trying to sweep this under the rug? Or have you seen some meaningful action, at least from your perspective, about some of the major problems with our system that you saw during COVID?
Yeah, well, for me, it's still in my face every day. I mean, I still see patients who've been injured by these shots almost daily in my office. These are new patients whose lives have been completely destroyed. So it's always I'm always seeing it. So and then I'm also still fighting the medical board. Now, I could give in and go on my way, but I just want to clear my name. I mean, I don't think I'm going to lose my license over this, but for me, it's a matter of principle. I'm also suing the medical board along with 5 other plaintiffs. We're suing 7 medical boards and the Federation of State Medical Boards because they basically went after us for free speech, right? They went after us for things we were saying on social media. And 2 of the doctors, they got their licenses revoked. Luckily, I mean, I didn't have that happen, but it's this situation impacted every single American. It directly impacted every single American. Now, some people were impacted more than others, but you can't. I mean, it was the entire. I can't think of another issue that was so impactful on so many people in this country.
Well, that's the thing. It was impacting across the board. Like I said,
right. The world. I mean, not even just the country, the world.
Yeah,
nobody's untouched by this.
Right.
I was in the Minnesota National Guard, just getting back from the deployment, which I mentioned earlier. And then it's like, okay. And then I went back to my corporate job, which this is a corporation. It's not connected to the government at all, which I thought, other than they sold legal software to the government. So because of that policy, that federal contractor policy, they're like, oh, now all of our 6,000 employees, which we were working from home, now have to get the COVID vaccine. And they're asking for our records. They're asking for our medical information. Our employer was. And I'm like, this is so weird. And then, like, I was at the top of my career now thinking, but at the time I'm like, I'm just kind of figuring this out. And then I was trying to do all the right things, and I was going to grad school from home. But they're like, if you don't get the COVID vaccine, you're going to be suspended, expelled. It was all these threats. And so it's like, we had everything against us. And then you add on top of that the lies connected to social media about it'll stop contagion, it'll stop transmission. And those were never really walked back by the people that said them.
Right.
Or comparing the unvaccinated to like serial killers, or
not going to
people who attack or assault people.
That. Like,
none of that got walked
that
back.
kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get it.
My own family, we had an experience with this because in New York, their restriction policies kept changing all the time, but they were very restrictive. And my grandfather had actually went in for some routine heart procedure that is like a normal. You go in and you leave in an hour or two, and he ended up being in the hospital for weeks, and then ultimately passing away because they moved him to another facility, like a rehabilitation facility. Where he wasn't allowed to have any visitors. So in the first facility, like people could like phone in, or like they'd let one person of the day visit him, or like people could come and stand at the glass window and wave to him. And then the second location, he was in there for like a week, and then he was gone. And
well, that's a good point.
Was he old? Yes. But I believe we probably
financial-
would have had another like 6 or 7 years with him before he departed.
I know. I hate to think about that financial aspect, because tell me what you think, Dr. Bowden, about the doctors, the hospitals, insurance companies. They were incentivized financially to report, COVID, all these things. And then the treatment stuff, what they were doing, weren't they getting financial compensation for this?
Yeah, they got a 20% bonus for every COVID patient. There was perverse incentives. Another thing that they would do in these hospitals, from the charts that I reviewed, is if the patient did not get the COVID shot, it would be on every single page of their medical record, which I know, you could say, okay, somebody with the flu, you might say on their history and physical when they come in, didn't get the flu shot, but you would not repeat it day after day, did not get the flu shot, did not get the flu shot. But that was what they did for these COVID patients. And I also saw evidence of euthanasia, reviewing charts. I saw a chart of a friend of mine's brother that was given morphine and insulin that hastened his death. It was very obvious. He had a normal blood sugar. There was no reason to give him insulin. And his pain score was 0. His respiratory rate was already diminishing. And they basically just tried to hasten the death. And I actually reported to the police. I reported to the medical board, and absolutely nothing happened.
What's fascinating about that is that I dealt with the death of my mother. She had sudden cardiac arrest, and this was after COVID. And the policies of COVID here in Minnesota, because we are one of the states that passed a bunch of stuff because we, have a Democrat trifecta. And one of the things that we did was that I was the medical power of attorney for my mother. And we had a long conversation. And after her cardiac arrest, it was my decision. Do we put her in DNR? And the conversation that we had, because I'm very pro-life, my mom said, you got to do what's right for your soul. I'm going to be going to where I'm supposed to go. Let that choice be for you. And so I'm like, nope, we are, full panel, everything we can do. And so she had went down 2 more times. And when she finally got to the hospital, like the doctor came and talked to me and said, we think the best thing to do is put, DNR. And I was like, nope, not going to do it. And they kept on fighting with me to the point that I had to go before an ethics committee. What? And they ruled that my mother that there was nothing effective, that if she went down again, that they were going to overrule my authority, and they revoked my full code and put DNR on her. That's what the state of Minnesota allowed to have happen. And so basically she was she was in a coma, and they said she's kind of plateaued out, and they had to free up a bed for her. Right. And because that Regions Hospital, and it's a trauma hospital, and so they said, we got to move her, but in order to move her, we actually have to perform a tracheostomy. And I was like, why? And they're like, well, we can't move her without doing it. And they're like, but she's at high risk, and because the DNR is on her, if she goes down, like, she's gone. And so they did the surgery. She was good. Literally the next morning, got a call, your mother's passed away. And that again is a consequence of COVID policy. And so part of the thing that I think is important, and what I respect about you and your fight, is that you are continuing to fight to spread that we need to fix this. When you talk about your poll and people trusting AI more than doctors, that's a bad thing for society. We need to be able to trust our medical professionals. We shouldn't just go and be Google doctors. I actually think that you spent time, energy, and your brain to actually know how to practice medicine. But in order for people to have that trust back, we have to completely expose all of the awful things that we allowed to have happen. And if we don't, I don't know. I'm not super optimistic about the future of humanity.
Like how long will we last? Like that, maybe that's okay for now, for 5 or 10 or 20 years. But if we're really thinking 100 years in the future, and going back to like China, well, hence where like a lot of stuff is related to, it's like they're thinking generationally. Like they'll lose some elections, some things like that, because they're thinking so much longer term. But yeah, like you said, AK, like if we're just going off of, it'll be faster and easier and less expensive to just turn over and let the machine decide how we're going to go about it, especially related to our family members. Yeah, my mother passed away a couple months ago, and even though she was in there was an assisted living on one wing and independent living on the other. She was on the independent living, doing the best she can. Issues were coming up more and more, but they were coming to the location and saying, hey, we got your COVID booster, whatever 8th version now at this point, and the flu, and they're like, we got it all into one vial now. And they were like encouraging, knocking on their doors. Oh, just come down. You don't need to talk to your family. Just now get your next COVID booster. And then, she passed away a couple months ago, and you don't know, if it led to that or not. And I'm like, Mom, maybe stop with the boosters. Like, what's the point? You're 78 years old. Like,
what about with your situation? Did she not see?
Yeah. So yeah.
I had the same argument with my parents, because all their doctors were telling them to get the shots, and I was like, listen,
people
I've worked with people in healthcare. Don't do it. And I think they still did it. Fortunately, they're still with us. But I mean, that stressed me out for a while.
Rolling the dice,
because I was sitting there uphill battling both of my parents. Like, you can't, like, this is not.
Well,
this
the
is
older
not good for you.
Very much trust their doctors to a fault.
Yep. It's a different generation.
Yeah, you want trust, but you don't want blind trust. And
having worked on the administrative side of healthcare myself, like, I'm always shopping around medical provider wise. Like, even if I have a good doctor, I'm still going to go occasionally get a second opinion just to make sure that, like, I'm getting the best possible outcome. And AK's like chuckling at me. You call that paranoia, but I'm very much not the way my parents are, where they're like, they found their one good doctor and that person could do no wrong. And it's like, that person's still infallible. Shout out to my parents who are probably watching. I'm going to get a phone call later.
It's that marketing. It's that branding. That, trust. You trusted them for that long, for that 20 years. But now they're above their pharmaceutical, their license, whatever. And now they have to go a different direction. And are you still trusting them? It's
right.
It's such
it's
a
crazy. I have actually a question for you, Dr. Bowden. This is something I was thinking about even just the other day after we went to the Duty to Disobey premiere with Drew and his crew. Speaking of which, your
Yeah, are you
DVD is
familiar
back
with
here.
that, Dr. Bowden, the film that came out?
Yeah, I keep meaning to watch that. I've not seen it yet.
Really good.
But I was looking at like what happened with COVID, like in the incentives we were talking about in the medical industry, right? They were getting paid bonuses for all this stuff. It almost seems like the warning signs for something like this were kind of already showing their face in society, like with what the education system was doing, right? Where you had all these schools incentivized to mark down kids as ADHD and ADD and all this stuff. And it's like, no, they're boys. They want to run around outside and climb trees and skin their knees and break stuff and throw rocks in the river, and they're pumping them full of all these drugs. But then you look and the schools get financial benefit the more kids that are prescribed these behavioral drugs. And it just seems like we saw that happening before COVID happened. It was almost like the test run, and like, now can we do it to the adults? I don't know what you're looking at that whole thing.
Yeah, I would say the protocol-driven medicine was a trending phenomenon that when I got out of residency, we didn't have that, but it came with the rise in technology where they'd have, and you said something about the drop-down menu earlier. I think it was Drew, and that's another issue that we run into is they limit what you can do by these drop-down menus. So if their drop-down menu doesn't have ivermectin, you're out of luck. You can't order ivermectin for your patient. But like, for example, what they started doing is rewarding doctors and punishing doctors on their compliance with these protocols. So you get a patient that comes into the ER with pneumonia. Well, these are all the things they want you to do. And if you do all those things, you get rewarded. And if you don't, you get punished. And it was a checklist. And so that became, and because I'm ENT, I didn't have to deal with that because it's not as, but for the primary care doctors, heart attack, pneumonia, bronchitis, asthma, all these protocols. So all these things that you had to, didn't really matter on varying factors with the individual patient. It was this is the way we do it. And if you don't, you get dinged financially. And if you do, you get rewarded financially. So that had been a growing trend, but I was I was outside of it. Just first as an ENT, we didn't really have, I think they have to do them now, but second, not taking insurance. I didn't have to do all that, but that's how they started to control doctors. And then we, of course, saw it in full force during the pandemic.
Yeah,
you're
you're
right.
right.
I'm curious, Dr. Bowden. Just one last question for me. For the future and for what you believe needs to happen in order to regain that trust, are you optimistic or are you pessimistic? And if either one, what can people do to try and accomplish that goal of regaining trust?
I don't know. I waver. Sometimes I'm completely deflated, and other times I'm encouraged. But I'm not going to give up. The thing we have on our side is social media. In that, I think
Now we do.
Yeah,
That's what I was going to touch on earlier. Is like we didn't have that a couple years ago.
Exactly. Yeah, I was kicked off of X for 5 months, and but that's one way we can hold or try to hold our elected officials somewhat accountable. Of course, then that's all warped with we've got the bots and the paid influencers, and that's sort of a mess as well. But it's one avenue that we didn't have in previous times.
Is there anything that you would want to direct people to try and do, or like, is there something that you would want people to hear you say that this is how they can, accomplish a goal of trying to get awareness out there? Like, is there one specific type of action that you have that you would want people to really follow or subscribe to or go on with?
Well, people think that no one's getting these COVID shots anymore, so it doesn't matter. But in fact, 7 million children have gotten COVID shot in the past since Trump took office. which is just criminal. I don't think anybody should be getting one of these shots, but certainly not a child. And so
My last follow-up, they asked me that if I wanted it still
for you or for your child or both?
for myself
Yeah. It's
at the VA. The VA is still offering them.
Well, yeah. I mean, the pharmacies, yeah, they're pushing them. And I mean, I honestly can't remember the last time I treated somebody for COVID. I can't remember the last time I was worried about a COVID patient. There's just absolutely no upside to this. So I started an organization called Americans for Health Freedom, and our primary goal is to get politicians to state that the COVID shot should be pulled off the market. And
Love it.
Sounds very simple, but as we all know, it's few politicians will go on record to say that. So we have now over 300 elected officials. AK, you would count if you want to sign the pledge. We have RNC committeemen.
At least that's straightforward, because people ask me, they're like, what do you want to happen? And I'm like, well, one, for this not to happen to anybody else again, this year, 5 years, whatever from now. And it's just like, and I just don't know, because people say like, oh, people in the chat, sue. Who am I supposed to sue? How am I supposed to do that? That's the thing. I met Charlie Kirk a couple of years ago at Turning Point USA at AmFest, and I was telling somebody else my story, and he just comes and overhears it, which was unheard of. Wow. And then we ended up, and his first response was sue him. Right. And I'm like, want to help me with that? Right. type deal. But that's usually what people say, like on our side of this is, but then I'm like, okay, well, how? But then they're like, okay, but they got the EUA, you got this, you got the 84 or whatever it was, 86. So it's just like all these hoops that I'm not a medical guy, like at all, or a legal guy until like I had to be, because I've been experiencing with it. But yeah, the reason that I jumped into this so-called fight, because I could have just sat back and listened to everybody and be like, no, you're fine. This it was a normal thing. But when they started bringing the pushing it on authorized or whatever it was for, so I think I was 37 at the time. That's when they opened it up to 37-year-olds around that, because it went from like elderlies to like 70 to like 60 to 50 to our age, and then they started go down to like 13 years old. And then when I was in the hospital, they brought it down to 6 months old to infants, and my son was 6 months at the time, and I'm like, no, absolutely not. I'm not going to be put in that situation. I need to share what happened to me so this doesn't happen again. But it looks like you got your pledge here. Could you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah, so it's americansforhealthfreedom.org. I had 4 members of Congress sign the pledge, and unfortunately, 3 of them are on their way out the door. So Thomas Massey signed, Marjorie Taylor Greene signed, Chip Roy signed, and the last one standing is Senator Ron Johnson. And I have a lot of state representatives, a lot of state senators, and I have a lot of candidates. So, for example, the Florida primary is coming up, and James Fishback has signed the pledge. Mo Dimanche has signed the pledge. Rachel Rodriguez has signed the pledge, and all 3 of them are running for governor of Florida. And there are a lot of people running for Congress and state representatives as well. So you can we don't give these people any money because we don't have a lot of money, but we just try to give them support on social media. And that's what you can do too. So you can follow Americans for Health Freedom on X, and you can amplify our posts, and you can amplify the people that we support and give them free marketing. That's just a very easy way to get involved. I will say also, I have come across 2 citizens who have made huge impacts. I mean, another thing that we've worked on is making ivermectin accessible or over the counter, because it was so demonized during the pandemic that this very, very safe drug became virtually impossible to get. And
well, that was the Joe Rogan thing where CNN modified his face to look more sickly after he talked, or he was talking about the topic, obviously, throughout this whole time, which has been amazing. And he's gotten so much hate. You've been on Rogan. And then he had, who was the CNN guy that he had on his show not too long after that? Do you remember?
Sanjay Gupta.
Yeah. And then Rogan called him out and he's like, they changed my face. And then the guy was, stunned and everything like that. So
Well, that
was a big issue. The
that was
ivermectin.
government-led propaganda effort against ivermectin. We actually sued the FDA over that and won.
Okay.
They had to take down their misinformation from X and social media and from their website.
Yeah, but you never hear the retraction, and that's never as loud as the initial push against that, especially with the imagery.
And you would think the current HHS, which is supposedly on our side, if it
Yes, let's talk about that right now. I really want to know the state of the issue right now. You talked about Marjorie Taylor Greene, out, and was it Massey that was on your?
Massey and Troy.
Yep.
A lot of these guys and women that I've talked to over the last couple of years, and I've never been political until this, but I was asked to come out to DC, speak with Marjorie Taylor Greene's people, to say everything that happened, and that led to the hearing. I think it was a Fauci one. I got lost in all those, but it led to a lot of this stuff, but it never really turned into anything. So I would like to know from you, like, where do you think things are standing right now with the administration on the issue, and kind of going back to AKs of like going forward?
Yeah, I think we're making some headway on a state level more than federal level. So I think 8 or 9 states introduced legislation to ban mRNA, and none of them got too far. But the fact that they were even proposed is a good sign. I think it will continue to go forward. And the candidate in Iowa, Zach Lawn, who just won Zach Lawn, just won the primary for Iowa governor, and he is very outspoken about these COVID shots and signed our pledge, and he won the primary. And we have lots of elected and people running for office in Iowa. So if I had to predict on Poly Market, I would say that Iowa will be the first state to ban mRNA shots. That's my prediction. And as the ivermectin, so ivermectin has actually made some headway. So Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Idaho have all passed laws making ivermectin available without a prescription. Now, practically speaking, it's still hard to get because the pharmacist has to give it, and the pharmacists are not cooperating. So, but I think the FDA, we sued the FDA. They should come out and make a statement to re-educate the public, to restore the brand of ivermectin, because ivermectin has been demonized as this dangerous medicine that's only suitable for horses. Like, that's what people who are not in the know or who are not educated believe.
And won't change their mind otherwise until the same authority that told them about that.
So we need
even then that would be tough.
Right, exactly. We need
to change a mind that's made
so
up.
What you were saying earlier with the older generation, it's got to be the same doctor basically that told them it was bad, it was good, has to tell them now it's not good for you.
Right.
Good luck.
Yeah. So yeah, even the current FDA, they'd probably discredit. They'd say, oh well, it's Robert Kennedy's FDA, so it doesn't count. But it would be a start to just say, yes, it's safe. It won a Nobel Prize in medicine. It's been given to billions of people very safely. And then I think they should make it over the counter. I did a poll on X, and I had 25,000 respondents, and I think it was like 60% of people were just buying it from the feed store, which is, it's probably safe because otherwise we'd be hearing that people were getting poisoned by it. But it's ridiculous that Americans have to go to the feed store to get their medicine. It shouldn't be that hard.
Yeah, but going back to RFK, to Trump, what I'm seeing is just less care for it, because maybe the money's not there with different things. I know a lot of the organization React 19 has put this is public, has put their care fund, which on hold right now due to reasons. And to me, that's like the scariest thing, because React 19 is known for let's help the injured people. Mm-hmm. And the fact that they're not able to do that currently at the moment, it is a bad state of affairs. They're not fighting legal stuff. There's other freedom movements and things that are doing that, but just like the injured, myself, many others that aren't talking as much as I am, are suffering because of this and not getting the right kind of support. They're fighting, these different things to get it to recognize the VICP related to this stuff, but it's going to take years. I compare it to the Agent Orange stuff with Vietnam and all the other things that it's going to be well past it in decades. But we could talk about this. And there's so much to talk about, like where we can go and everything like this. Maybe we can do a future episode or space.
We absolutely need to do a part 2.
Yeah,
I have a million.
We definitely need a part 2.
Mind.
Well, wherever that may be. But yeah, we could dive into this for sure. But let's get to some of these chats and then just give a good wrap up. David, you got these?
Yeah, it looks like Melinda was showing us some love here in the chat. Appreciate that, Melinda. Real quick, we the people will never forget COVID. And then to your point earlier, Drew, she also threw out that you should sue the VA. I don't know that we as vets can sue the VA, but I do believe we can sue individual
providers. Can, David, because
but they have to sign a thing agreeing to be sued.
There's a way. But David, when we do our CMP exams, it's actually a lawsuit against the person in charge of the VA. Like when you look at the paperwork. But yeah, it's just a matter of figuring out how to go about it. But thank you, Melinda. I appreciate that.
And then yes, let's shut down the economy for 2 years and poison our people. Let's see how that works out. What a flipping scam. I'm not an anti-vaccine person, but good grief. I think that's an accurate representation of the frustration of a lot of the just American people.
Yep, I share my story and I get called an anti-vaxxer. I'm like, I took the thing because I based it off this knowledge that people from authority said.
And it looks like Melinda threw one in there for me. She said, "My name is pronounced Mihai Love. You met me at you and her friend at Duluth. I'm a Wright County BPOU GOP delegate." Awesome. And then just here in the last thing, she threw out a "Good for you, Dr. Bowden. Go get him."
Love it.
That's why I love these live shows, because we actually get to talk to people. And I listen to live shows, and we got to stay connected. Like you said, Mary, we have social media, the best that we have. And I say thanks for Elon Musk for taking over X. People thought it would never happen, and then it taking over Twitter, and then it did. And that was my motivation. I had never been on Twitter before then. And then I jumped on there and found like-minded people. You and I have been in spaces together, and that's where I really got support. I probably wouldn't be where I am at. I'm at 2 years now out of the manual or powered wheelchair. And I just keep pushing, and there's no other reason. And throughout the hospital, paralyzed, everything, they kept asking me, "Oh, are you, suicidal and this and that?" I'm like, no, I'm the opposite. I want to get better. I want to be the best father I can for my son, still provide care and support, and do my best with my knowledge, skills, and ability now as a medically retired veteran. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm speaking out here and just really just want to connect. And I just want to thank you so much for doing what you and because everyone can do something related to it, and you keep speaking up now, 5 some years later. So I just want to really thank you for that.
Well, thank you. And if we have time real quick, I don't know if you've heard about the thing going on in Japan. That
a little bit.
It's showing some promise. They've done 40 patients now.
Okay.
And
how should one get involved with that?
Well,
for those of us that don't know what the thing in Japan is, can you give us a
sorry?
Yeah, overhead view.
Yeah. So it's a treatment they're doing. It's filtering the blood. So the thought is that the spike protein is causing formation of amyloid, which is a very difficult protein to break down, and like medications usually don't do it. And they're filtering it, kind of like dialysis, but they're using this special filter that we can't get in the United States. And then they're also using stem cell growth factors, and they're seeing really good results. I don't know about paralysis. I'm doing a podcast tomorrow night on X.
Well, I have all the symptoms: neuropathy,
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I'm going to ask about paralysis. I don't know if they've treated anybody yet, but they definitely focus on neurological issues. And
Yep. I mean, that's what GBS is. It's a neuromuscular
right.
illness. Yeah. It affects
So
everything.
is this the drug that is the oral? It's like an oral I guess prophylaxis or something.
No.
Okay, it's not that one. Okay,
No, this is a procedure.
Yeah, it's a procedure.
procedure.
Yeah, I heard Germany, they were doing stuff too. It's funny, Germany and Japan, but
I know. Yeah.
yeah.
But apparently, so they've used this system for other neurological issues in Japan for 10 years. So it's not like brand new. So then they decided, well, let's try it for these patients injured from the COVID shots, and have seen great results so far. So
Okay.
I've interviewed the scientists behind it 4 times now. It's on my YouTube channel. And then I'm going to do another interview tomorrow with the same scientist on vaccine. DSRF, Vaccine Safety Research Foundation, is holding the interview, and it's going to be with me and then the scientists in Japan.
Okay.
That's
I would
awesome.
really like
Incredible.
to learn more about that. Maybe you and I and a couple other people in our circles can kind of, because I think that's the most I've heard that people are doing to help the injured. So yeah, let's continue that conversation. But yeah, Mary, Dr. Bowden, thank you so much again for jumping on here. It was just amazing to have you. And if you don't ask, it'll always be a no. So where can people find you? What are you doing right now?
Yeah, I'm most active on X, although I'm trying to get out of the X bubble. So if you are, I'm trying to build my YouTube account, because you know how hard that is. You know, they do not like any of this talk. So if you're on YouTube, if you can, it's always Mary Bowden MD for YouTube, and even I'm on TikTok now. I have something like 122 followers on TikTok. Hanging on.
123.
I've got like all these community violation strikes against me, but they haven't kicked me off. I've been kicked off too many times to count. So yeah, I feel like we have to get outside of X and spread the word.
Yeah, that was the only place for the longest time, but now, Mark Zuckerberg went on Rogan and be like, no, we made some mistakes, and now we're gonna open it and be like, all right, let's test it. And we got Melinda in the chat, so we're talking about all this. And
I'm actually doing really well on Facebook, which is for a while I just didn't even bother posting because it would just get struck down immediately.
We got to keep fighting for it. But yeah, thank you, Mary. Stay on here. David, where can people find you? What do you got going on this week?
Yeah, you can find me at The Peruvian Gentleman on all my social medias. This week, I will be at a wedding, so I will not be doing anything crazy outside of that at the moment. I think in the future here, I'm going to be doing some door-to-door for some candidates. It's like AK and I always talk about, you got to be involved in your local politics. Otherwise, the things that happen to you, you don't get to complain about them because you didn't get yourself involved. But yeah, you can find me at The Peruvian Gentleman or here on Culture Warriors Unchained with my 2 awesome co-hosts, Drew and AK.
Excellent. AK, what about you?
Yep, you can follow me on X, Facebook, and Instagram at Real AK Kamara. I 100% appreciate you coming on the podcast, Dr. Bowden. I took a look at your pledge. I see that my fellow committee member, committeeman from Texas, Dr. Robin Armstrong, has signed the pledge. So I'm definitely going to take a look at it. I think it's important, and the reason why I loved having you on is because from your perspective, where you're ground zero for where a lot of this was happening in Texas, you haven't given up the fight. You continue to push hard. And I think that that's probably the most important thing you could do, is continue to advocate for issues that people often are forgetting, because people want to move on. They don't want to think about the mean and nasty stuff, but that's very, very short-sighted. And I think it has so many negative consequences. You can also follow me on TikTok at AK Kamara. I just now fell short of 150,000 followers because I need to start posting, and I keep on saying I'm going to post, but I'm going to post very soon. But also make sure that you guys are going and checking out basically our podcast pages. So on X, we're at CW Unchained. Go and give us a follow there. Make sure that you guys are following us and subscribing on YouTube following and subscribing on Rumble. And we also have, which you'll see at the end of the podcast, that you can go to our new platform, subscribestar.com/CW Unchained. You can become a subscriber. And like Drew had mentioned, you're going to get something super sweet, potentially throw in
we're gonna do some
Due to
awesome
Disobey
stuff
and
for
some
our-
other
our
awesome stuff. So
subscribers. Our
yeah, so that's where you guys can
subscribers
follow me at, and see you guys around next week. Where can people follow you at, Mr. Outstanding?
Yep, Drew Outstanding on X. I've been there since Elon took over, brought in the kitchen sink, and it has been awesome. You know, X is definitely different. It wasn't my jam before, but now it is. But I'm so grateful I was able to connect with people like Dr. Bowden and Brianne Dressen and all these amazing people. Caroline Stanzik, who we were with at Turning Point USA AmFest this past year, doing interviews and talking about things. And just a shout out to everybody who's hopefully watching this. You can make a difference with something that's important to you, especially when you're genuine, you're authentic, and you're trying to do the best you can. I think the four of us here can attest to that. And you can't sit on the bench when it comes to these kind of matters and something that's so important to you, your health, your values, your profession, your family, whatever it may be. But I'm Drew Outstanding on X. Like I said, Operation Drew Outstanding on YouTube, where I do my speaking engagements. I'll be in Boston from Friday to Sunday, where I'll be participating, hopefully doing well in a 5K. So I'll have a little bit of help, but hopefully make it a couple miles, and then it ends up at the field there. I'm blanking on it. What is the field in Boston? Baseball.
Which one? Boston Baked Bean Field. I don't know, man.
But anyways, the race will end there, and then I'll just be talking about veteran disabilities and
Talk about Fenway.
It'll end at Fenway Park, and speaking about veterans, you can't just sit on the couch, sit in bed, be connected to all these pharmaceuticals, and just be kind of stuck. So I am a big proponent of adaptive sports, which hopefully getting a mono ski in a couple months. And then all winter time, I'll be on that single ski, doing the best I can, even with some paralyzed legs. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Melinda. I know you had a couple more chats there. Wright County Fair, Howard Lake, Minnesota this week. Woot, woot. Come out, tractor pull. That is such a Minnesota thing, which is awesome, and I love it. And she asked you to put the link for the pledge either in the comments or maybe in the show.
Yep, you'll see it on the outro. You'll see.
Yep.
It.
So
We'll add it to
awesome.
the show
Culture
notes.
Warriors Unchained. Thank you very much. Tune in next week. Take care.
Good night, everybody.
Culture Warriors Unchained.